Welcome to another edition of Real Talk with Real People, a candid conversation with Dr. Caroline Bethea-Jones, and I am your host. We have come to the middle of our year-long conversation with men and women of faith, the topic being religion, subtopic being faith without works is dead. We come to the part of the project in which I speak to, I don't want to say ordinary people because we're all ordinary people, but my conversations are with men and women who are not pastors or affiliated with church to the point of roles, although they may be actively in church and actively doing church things. This is the time that I get to have candid conversations with men and women who are just doing the right thing. They are living their lives, and they're living their lives in such a way that they can give honor to God. I am happy to be at this part of my project. I have been inspired by all of my guests who have come on. They have all said good things. They've all said things that will inspire you, have inspired me. And as we get to the end of these conversations, I am looking forward to the big finale when I get an opportunity to have a Zoom meeting with all of my guests so they can come back and tell me what their experiences were and what they learned from the other guests. It is amazing that I have had this journey and this opportunity because I have been on this whirlwind and it's been taking me places that I didn't even recognize that I could go. So I'm going to continue. Again, let me just say that these are pre-recorded. Most of my guests were pre-recorded many, many months ago. So the conversation may not correspond to the actual today, but the message is still the same. My next guests are friends of mine, colleagues, people who I know personally, and I know that you're going to find them to be inspiring too. So my guest today is Vernae Taylor, and Vernae is a friend of mine, and we're going to have a candid conversation today about her faith walk. Welcome, Vernae, to our show. How are you?
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Now, I just want you to know, as to remind you that this is a conversation about religion, but it's a specific conversation about faith. So I'm talking to men and women of faith, and I'm asking them to share with me their faith walk and their how they got from where they were to where they are, because nobody wakes up and is born the person that they are. They literally go through a transformation. So talk to me. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do in life?
Yes. Yes, I am Vernae Taylor. I am an entrepreneur, speaker, and mentor. And by day, I actually work as an aide to third graders in the school system as we do our hybrid schedule.
Yes.
But yes, so that's actually a trip in itself. But primarily, I am really on this journey to find myself and to fully realize my purpose in life and what my impact and what my legacy will be. And that alone is hard enough.
I understand.
So that's a little bit about myself.
Yes, I understand. And I think we're all on this journey. I'm on this journey. Just because I'm older than you don't mean that my journey has been fulfilled. I'm still every day trying to figure out, where am I going with this? How am I going to be the person that I was created to be? Because I'm not sure I'm totally there yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So where does it start for you? Where did it start?
Wow. That's a good question. I know that for me, I come from a musical family, creative family.
Mm-hmm.
My father loved jazz. My father, I guess in his heyday, he was a percussionist because it seemed like he would always have a beat just going on in his head. He wrote poetry. My mother is a singer. My brother, who's 6 years older than me, is a singer. And they said I came out singing. I think I started at 2, and we started performing together. I was as young as 5. So I would say that was my first scratch to the surface of who I would become or who it is that I wanted to be. And I believe it was my brother who took me to church first. And it's very blurry now as to how it all began, but I just remember church being a very big part of our lives, very big part of my upbringing. We grew up in a Baptist church in Summit, New Jersey, and I remember my pastor and the sense of community and family, and we were singing in the choir and singing solos and Vacation Bible School, and always being rooted in the Word. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for my praying grandmothers and my just people praying for me. I think we don't even realize how we've gotten through a lot of things simply because somebody was praying. And I can't really say as a kid I knew what it meant to have a relationship with God. I didn't know what it meant to have a prayer life, but I just know that it wasn't easy. I didn't come up in an easy life with, a broken family, my father dealing with alcoholism and addiction, my mom dealing with mental illness, and neither of them really being fully equipped to take care of us. And my dad having enough sense of well-being to know that somebody's got to step in. So at some point, I believe it was, there was nobody else that was willing to take both of us together as a package deal, brother and sister, 6 years apart. So we needed somebody that can step in. And at some point, I guess the conversation happened where my grandmother was willing to go through the fire and gain custody of us. And that alone is difficult for a child, not even so much that, okay, our parents are not together because their relationship had dissolved and they were separated. Even though they weren't yet divorced, they couldn't physically and emotionally always be there for us. So coming from a broken family, being raised by a grandparent, this day and age, a working grandparent, you're just trying to find yourself and you're trying to find your way.
Right.
So it was a difficult environment at times. And I think my brother probably would have more experience, of more recollection of what that was like. I'm grateful for the fact that me being the last grandchild, well, at the time, now we've got tons, but I was the only girl, I was the baby, I was somewhat sheltered, and they protected me from a lot. So there was a lot that I didn't get to see that I just came to discover as of recently when I became an author and I started digging into my life. So fast forward, when I got to the point where I really wanted to create who it is that I wanted to be, and I wanted to dig deep into these questions of what happened with my dad, what happened with my mom, what happened in the past, and why are we with the grandma, and why are we, kids are very inquisitive, and I was no different. And so in asking those questions, I had to be very intentional about who I wanted to be, not based off of who they said we should be, not based off of my family lineage, not based off of what my family's limitations were and what they didn't do, what they should have did, and, the mistakes they made. It had to be something that I could define for me. So I believe my spiritual walk into relationship building and prayer life started with God when I found myself in Somerville, Charlotte Pentecostal Church, my pastor at the time, Pastor Patricia Webster, a phenomenal woman. God bless her, her soul. She is no longer with us. She was just a very spectacular woman. It was a small, down home, family church, tight-knit church. And there is where I believe I learned the fundamentals. Bible study was a strong foundation. Not only reading the word, but understanding the word, being able to dissect it, having a fierce leader who not only was up on a pedestal or up on the podium, right? Because we look at these figures and leaders and pastors, and we sometimes put them on a pedestal. We look at them as almost untouchable, right? Inaccessible. Right. Like they're like not real, right? I remember the first time I saw my childhood pastor, Reverend Sanders, of Fountain Baptist Church in Summit. The first time I saw him out with jeans, like, oh my God, Pastor, you have jeans? Like, you wear jeans? It's the weirdest thing. But what I loved about my pastor was she was a councilwoman. She was a counselor to young people, couples, singles, anybody going through any type of transition. She had an open door policy at her house. You could just come in at any given time. She was a woman that not only was well dressed, she was revered by her family, a mother of 5, just knew how to just love you and correct you in love. She was just everything. She was everything I've never really encountered. The perfect balance between grace and softness and strength.
Right. So she was an inspiration, right?
Absolutely, she was. And being there, it gave me a sense of family that maybe I didn't know that I was missing. It gave me a sense of stability and consistency that I didn't know I was void of. And there is where I actually got baptized again. So I know a lot of us have a story of being baptized as a kid, but not really understanding what that means, right? And definitely not understanding what challenges we would face, and how that faith part that comes in and how that will be tested. So when I came into my adulthood and came into knowing the struggles of my past and understanding that I want to be different and I need to learn and I need better tools and I need to be in therapy and all of these things that happened during that time while I was there. It's probably around college age, probably prior to my 20s, late teens, going into my 20s. And it was a huge part of my life until she passed. And sadly, she passed shortly after my dad. That same year, she passed. And then her daughter, who also was named Patty as well, a mentor of mine, passed as well. So that's where my journey began and my relationship in prayer life began.
Okay, so the church was a family to you.
Absolutely was.
Yeah. And as knowing you, I haven't known you that long, but I do know this much about you from the minute that I met you. There was something about you, and we've had this conversation before. I've told you this before.
You always say that.
Yes, because there was something about you that I was pulled into. And I know that you came into audition for me because I was doing a play. And you came into audition for me. But there was just something. There was a light about you. There was a joy that just came from you that made me feel good. It was like you were this light that I was drawn toward. And that's amazing to me. Because
to me too, because I don't remember doing very well in that audition.
That's what you said. You said, "Oh wow, I can't believe you called me back because I didn't do that well." But it was something about you, and I often say that there's a light that comes from a person who is strong in their faith and who's spiritual and who has God as part of their lives. Now, I knew that about you without you even saying anything to me because you actually were you are definitely light of the world. I see your light. And that's why I had asked you to come and have this conversation with me because I saw that in you.
Wow.
Yeah. And
I
I
received
know
that.
so yeah, I know sometimes it's hard to see in yourself. But I think it
Yeah.
speaks volumes when you can be that type of a inspiration yourself, even though you have been inspired by so many people, that you can still be that inspiration.
Yeah.
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 So let's
That
talk
is
yeah,
amazing.
it is
Yes.
amazing.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about some of your work, because I
Okay.
didn't know that you came from a musical background. Um which is amazing because we are an entertainment family ourselves here in this house. You know, we do um everything music, plays, we
Theatrical.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, very, very artsy.
Yeah. Artistic.
Yeah. So I learned that about you today, which is great and amazing. So let's talk a little bit about where you found yourself, and was there a longing that you had within yourself to go in that direction? Because you've written books, you've been in plays, you've sing. So was there a longing inside of you that was pulling you in one direction?
Mm. Well, it's funny that you use the word longing. As I always feel like I'm always longing for something. I feel like there's always something more I'm trying to discover. And I always ask myself, my gosh, why didn't I just pick an easier life? Like, why do I have to feel so deeply? Why do I have to love so hard? Why do I have to um, just dig so deep and
Mm-hmm.
search so closely for the meaning, the deeper meaning and understanding, when there are some people just that seem to float through life. And I'm like, my goodness, what a life, and I don't know why it just can't be easier. So I asked myself that. I would say that if, my family were to answer that question and how others perceive me, I was always imaginative. I was always expressive and somewhat dramatic, very, even though they said that I started talking late, when I started, they couldn't stop me. So I always had this sense of, what's the word? Escapism,
Okay.
where I wanted to kind of just be in another place. So I think that's where the writing came. I was always a writer. So I know back in the day, we called that a diary. So,
Right.
you know, young people where, you're writing in a diary, it's almost like a secret thing. I was always into writing poetry
Mm-hmm.
at a young age. And then that kind of transitioned into journaling, right? So it being a daily practice for me, something that really helps to keep me grounded in writing. And so I knew at a young age that I wanted to be a published author. That was like one of my dreams that I wrote down. So I don't know if anybody else has, they call it a bucket list, but I think for me, it was just like goals, just
Yes,
dreams.
just
As a
goals.
kid,
Yeah.
yeah, right. We would play these little games of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, who we're going to marry, how many kids we're going to have, what we're going to do. Like, it was one of those things where I had a list of, I wanted to tour. I wanted to tour nationally. I wanted to travel internationally. I wanted to be a published author. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be a singer and do an album, all of these things. And so one being that I knew that I wanted to write my autobiography. And I said, well, I'm going to be somebody someday. When I'm a household name, someone's going to read about my story.
Mm.
And so I started in 2008. I was working at an architectural design company, and I was working in the front office and really loved that job. They actually had, I think they just completely eliminated the department, or eliminated and dissolved the company. It was like a boutique company.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed it. And I think the times when I just had some downtime, I didn't really have much to do. I remember just being on the computer and I began typing,
Mm-hmm.
and I started writing my autobiography. And I started, and then I got to a point where this is where the turning point was for me in life. It was a turning point. It was also a pivotal point, critical, however you want to call it. It was everything all in one. I was approaching my 30th birthday, born in July. So I was approaching my 30th birthday, and I was in, at the time, a nearly 10-year relationship on and off. I was seeing somebody on and off for that long, and I thought I was going to marry this person. I was, of course, attending my church. that I, at the time loved, but we came in together, and the relationship was dissolving. My pastor had fell ill very quickly, and my dad was ill. And at this point, he knew far before we did that he had stage 4 cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a lot of things going on simultaneously in life. So at a time when I was really, should have been a time of celebration. I think 30, society tells us, I have no idea who makes these rules, but society tells us that 30 for a woman, you should be coming into yourself, like, oh, you should probably be getting ready to get married, and have, your career should be solid, and are you going to have kids, and you kind of are propelling into this new dimension of yourself. And for me, it was the complete opposite. It was a lot of endings. It was a lot of goodbyes. It was a lot of losses.
Mm-hmm.
So coming into when I was going to turn 30, I'm ending this relationship. My father passed. My pastor and my pastor's daughter, a mentor of mine, later on that year passed. And it was a huge blow to just everything I thought life was, right? Because we have this perception of life and how our life is going to pan out and what path we're going to take and what we're going to do. And when certain people in your life that really you believe make up your identity have really shaped you, have really supported you, have really influenced you, when those things are removed or casted out or just no longer there,
mm-hmm.
it makes you question everything, right?
So
there is when I questioned, who am I? What is it that I want? What is my life now? What does this all mean? The things the words that were unspoken between my father and I, the things that we never got to do, the time I thought I had that we didn't have,
mm-hmm.
this man that I thought I was going to marry, what does that mean for me now? And why didn't it work out? Why couldn't I save the relationship? Why couldn't I save my father? This woman that was just everything to me, she was everything to everybody, was never sick. It was one of those things, it was a very bizarre thing when she got sick and when she passed very quickly. And then my mentor, her daughter, who battled several types of cancer, really, really fought for her life for several years, was finally taken out. It was almost like the ending, but it was the beginning.
Yes.
And that's where the book Breakthrough came in. I had already started writing my autobiography, but at the time I had kind of taken a break and I was having what you call writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
But this opportunity came about. It wasn't until 2019 that the opportunity came about. But where I start in that portion of my contribution to that book Breakthrough, I pretty much start at this point, this pivotal moment in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I do like a flashback to, what it was like as a child and who was in my life then. But then I get to the point where I speak about this pivotal moment where I had to be reborn,
right.
A pivotal moment where I had to reflect and really get quiet with myself. I remember saying, when I checked myself into therapy, I said, before I become someone's wife or before I become someone's mother, I want to know what trauma I'm inheriting that I didn't ask for, what I need to work on. And that was the beginning of my journey. That was the beginning of me and really beginning to write the vision, right? So the Bible says, write a vision, make it plain, and without vision, people perish.
Yes.
So one thing I will always say, I always had vision. I always had a vision of myself outside of
mm-hmm. the
toxic trauma, negative space, broken family. I always had a vision for something else. It's not always easy to see it, but one thing I will say, I've been great at documenting. So I always write things down. So I started to write down what I wanted to do. and what I wanted my life to look like, and what were the things I wanted to combat. Because I think in the community, in the Black community, I believe that we are fighting against a lot, right? We're
Yes.
fighting against, it's like spiritual warfare. We're fighting against slavery. We're fighting against being mentally enslaved. We're fighting
Yes.
against the bondage of the world, and how they perceive us, and then how then in turn, how do we now see ourselves, and how do we become whole again? And
Right.
so I always feel like I'm always fighting against that, and that's why I feel like you have to have a vision. You have to figure out, okay, well, what are the things that you want to change? And that's where I began.
Yes. There are so many people in the world who would not have been able to even get past some of the stuff that you literally had to overcome. Now, would you say that during that time that you felt the spirit of God around you? Because, a lot of times we're uplifted and given that little special push because we feel like there's something deep inside of us that keeps us pushing.
Oh, absolutely. I can remember like very vividly conversations I had with a friend of mine, who was another, like a big sister in the church, conversation I had with the pastor, conversations I had even with the guy I was dating at the time, his mother. I just remember feeling like this is it. Like, I don't even want to go on. I stopped performing. I stopped singing. I was actually signed to an independent label, music label. My album was nearly done. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just did. I couldn't see my life or see myself outside of this, this pain. Like, it seemed insurmountable at the time. And we always say this too shall pass, but when they're in the midst of it, it's like,
Yes.
you don't want to hear that. Like,
Exactly.
what do you mean? It's not passing. And if it's passing, it's not passing quick enough,
Right.
you know? So for me, I just didn't know that I could go on. I didn't know that. I remember thinking, okay, well, I don't know that I can live without this person. And there's no one else I want to be with, and no one else will want me. And then I remember just the root of it all being obviously the fragmented relationship with my father, and not really having the emotional security and self-esteem and the foundation that I needed. And so God was absolutely in the midst of it, because he sent the right people to cover me in that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in that time, I became a different person. Everyone knows me. I'm sure you know me, Dr. Caroline, as being outgoing,
Yes, you are.
vivacious, pretty outspoken and loud. Some would call me confident. And I really got to a point where I was recluse. I became introverted. I actually experienced a lot of severe anxiety in large crowds. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk. It was very hard for a lot of people that were already, had experienced me in a certain way, or
Mm-hmm.
very familiar with a certain Vernae, that now dealing with this devastating loss that I didn't know would hit me so hard,
Right.
because we were in a place where our relationship was was it was, I don't want to say broken, because thank God we had that one final conversation, I feel like, and he reconciled a lot of things. But it was definitely estranged. And so in that time, I just didn't know, will I be able to make it? I was just so different. And so during that time, I had my pastor, I had my pastor's daughter, who's a mentor. I had big sisters, people that covered me in prayer. I remember a lot of reading, a lot of rebuilding
Mm-hmm.
myself, a lot of reading scriptures and affirmations, and having them surrounding me in everything that I do.
Right.
Popping up in my phone, on my desk, in a book, on the vanity, in the car. I had to be very intentional about the music, anything that was surrounding me.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a lot of books. I remember I was reading The Power of Now, Beauty for Ashes, of course, the Bible. I was reading a lot with Joyce Meyer. I was listening to a lot to rebuild. I don't even know if I can say rebuild. Maybe just build what wasn't there at all. A sense of self and self-esteem and self-worth. I don't believe those things are just innate.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of that is developed. Now, I will venture to say, and I believe it was Maya Angelou that said it, we're worthy simply because we're born. But we don't come into the true realization of that worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
I think, until we experience life in a certain way, we experience ourselves in a certain way, we establish and develop a sense of self-love. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's almost like we don't know that unless there's somebody at a very young age that's already cultivating that in us.
Yes.
Because it's very easy. I know, working with third graders, it's my first time working in with this age bracket, because when I started as a para years ago, I was working with kindergarten, and then I skipped and went to middle school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
So working with this pivotal age bracket, you can see how easily and how quickly you can break a child's spirit.
Yes.
And that's it. And as quickly as you can break a child's spirit is just as significant is to be able to build it up and establish it and cultivate it and nurture it. So so that's the foundation for them as they grow and as they meet challenges in the world.
Yeah. That brings me to my next topic, of mentorship. I asked a few of my guests the same question, how important mentorship is. And listening to you, I know how important it was to you. I know how important it is to me. Let's talk a little bit about mentorship and what it means to you, and how does one become a mentor?
Well, it's funny. Well, mentorship for me, first off, is extremely important. As a child, I thank God for the Summit YMCA. At the time, we had a group called Black Achievers.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to my childhood mentor, Dwight Argyle, who I received a scholarship in his name. We lost him at a very premature time before we graduated, and such an amazing man, along with Taisha Cromwell, who is still out here, spreading her greatness in the world. But I thank God for that group, those people like them, my church, Fountain Baptist Church, and for a lot of the counselors and just amazing teachers and faculty that really cared enough about our situations. And my coaches as well. It was very important at a young age just to have, and what I believe a mentor is, as far as by definition, having that role model, having somebody, a leader that you can trust, that is worthy of trusting and worthy of leading you and worthy of having a positive influence. And I believe that it really can change the trajectory of a child's life. So I'm really happy that I knew what that was early on. I think based off of just how compassionate and loving and nurturing I've always been, and I believe that God has really just designed a lot of women like that. I think that that's just something that we are. Even though I've never been a mother. At a young age, I found myself in those spaces of nurturing. My very first job that my Spanish teacher got for me was working in a bookstore where I was reading to young children. Would come in, we would have somebody dress up like the character, and I would be with the kids, being all animated and reading them these stories, right? So nurturing them in that space with reading, which is so fundamental. And then shortly thereafter, in the upper grade levels, we ended up work a lot. Myself and a lot of my friends, we ended up working for the Pet Foundation, People in Educational Pursuits, which was a tutoring program. So it was tutoring and mentoring, and it once again, it was something that really helped to shape their lives and really preparing them for greatness. Not like, oh, do you want to go to college? No, we're preparing you because you are going to do something, and you're going to do something with your life, and you're going to be great at it. And it was not an option.
Right.
Failure wasn't an option. So we worked with that. And then even in the Black Achievers program, we learned a lot about outreach, community basing. And so that my mentorship journey started early on for me as being a mentor and being, as you said, influential or inspiring. And then as I came into the space of authorship, of having a voice, right? I feel like we all should have a strong voice and point of view. I then got into speaking. And I think that was more so by necessity, just to have a voice. I feel like even when I was working in corporate, they used to call me a rabble-rouser because I was always speaking up for someone. I always felt like I had to advocate. I had to speak for the voices. I always felt like I had to campaign no, this is outrage. This is a travesty. We need to do something about this. Who do we need to talk to? Who do I need to call? And that's how I even got into certain committees and groups and formulated groups in the space when I was working in Johnson & Johnson in 2 different divisions. And now here, working for myself, it's just natural to me. I feel like it's organic that being in entertainment and being in the limelight in any way possible, even if you're just a regular, around the way girl, and you're on social media, you have influence. Someone's always watching. You know what I mean? Even when you don't think they're watching, I realize people that don't even follow me, I know that people just watch my story, my IG story on Instagram. And for that reason, the way that I wake up as far as my practices of whether it be an affirmation, whether it be a scripture, whether it be a daily word, when I put those things up there because it's a part of my normal morning routine, I know someone's watching. I know someone's reading. I know someone, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that alone is mentoring. That alone is influencing. And it's just really about, taking that and and making that a positive force, because we all have the power. It's just really, are we using our power for good or bad?
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of your writings. You mentioned Breakthrough, but there are a couple more books that you have. I think I'm trying to remember the title. Letters to Your Father.
I know there's a lot of it.
Letters to Your Father. Is that the name of it?
It's Letters to My Father, The 7 Steps in Healing from the Loss of a Parent. And actually, Breakthrough wasn't even my first entry point to authorship. I think it was the one that really was near and dear to my heart because it was me. It told my story. It was almost like you got a glimpse of who I am. But prior to that, I was featured in The Actor Side Hustle with an amazing woman, Jeanette Ng, who created the Actors in Christ group. So it was an actors group, and she really she felt it was really important to create a space for artists to know that they can still pursue their artistry and still find jobs and things on the side that can be complementary to their lifestyle. Yeah. And so at the time when I was a para for several years, I was able to be featured in that book, sharing my experiences as a paraprofessional and how that helped me while I was touring nationally. When I was, when I was off the leg for certain times that we were going to be traveling. When I was off, I would be working with the school system, and when I was on, I would still have the security of knowing that I would be working long term with specific groups and faculty members. I also Shout out to Rosa Sharon in Plainfield, New Jersey. I was also a featured poet in Potpourri from the Heart. And although that's no longer in print, so sad that it's not, because it's such a beautiful, beautiful melting pot of encouraging, uplifting, inspirational stories and gifts. I wrote a book. A poem called "Young." I think it was "Young Girl." I now have since changed it, but "Young Girl, You Rock," and that spoke to empowering young women with their confidence, their self-esteem. And then Breakthrough with Johnny Winbury, Les Brown, and Nick Halleck, and authors across the country was a huge point for me in 2019. Shortly thereafter, recently, I did Letters to My Father, 7 Steps to Healing from the Loss of a Parent, my journey with navigating grief and loss. And at the same time, throughout this pandemic, I was also featured in The Evolution Effect and Our Truth Is Not a Lie. My Truth Is Not a Lie is a really special one because that was actually supposed to just be an audiobook dedicated to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, speaking about the Black experience. And that was something that was near and dear to my heart because during the pandemic, I ended up being out on the front line and speaking out against the injustice. And I went to several marches and to speak in several rallies and protests. And that, because the group of people I was working with and those that had pre-ordered really, really wanted a paperback, tangible version of this, we then adapted it into hard copy. And then The Evolution Effect speaks to breaking barriers and adversity, overcoming adversity, and breaking patterns in your life.
Yes, which is what you have done.
Well, I'm trying. I am a work in progress. Okay, let's just keep it all the way real.
Okay, we're keeping it all the way real. We are all a work in progress. So I'm gonna tell you, I'm listening to your story. A lot of it reminds me of myself when I also was growing up, and teen. I started writing early, like you said, keeping a diary, writing poetry. Trying to deal with some of the things that was happening in my life. Nothing as tragic as yours, but still trying to figure out where I was going and what I was going to do. And it's amazing when I talk to someone whose journey is similar to mine, and I know.
So I have something to look forward to.
Yeah, well,
I can be more like you when I grow up.
Well, you already more like me. Okay. I want to be more like you, but it's great because we take this journey. Nobody knows where they're going to end up, and we know we have this thing within ourselves that keeps pushing us, that keeps telling us that we can do this, that we can do this. So many people don't get to this point, Vernae. So many people bow out before they even see their greatness. So many people don't get to see what they would have become if they simply would have kept the faith, if they simply would have stepped out with courage and just kept moving. And it's one of the things that I like to bring up because this thing that we're all going through, and we all have this thing inside of us, but so many people don't tap into it. So many people don't tap into it. Now, there's so many names to it. There's so many ways to say it, but I like to say it's my God consciousness. I always felt like there was someone protecting me from all of the outside noises and all of the things that I didn't get a chance to do in life. I'm looking at myself now and I'm grateful that I didn't have a chance to do it. Because I see now that it was...
So he was keeping you from something.
Yes. That I was being kept, even though I felt so different than everybody else growing up. And felt...
Yeah, me too.
You're right. I sensed that. Feeling like you don't have a place here and that you don't really belong. But yet, you have to keep moving forward to see where it's going to take you. And a lot of times we find that where it takes us is where we need to be. I think what you went through and even what I went through and what other people have gone through shapes us to be the women that we are today because it is the women that we are today, that is inspiring, that is motivating, that's uplifting other women to keep following a path that they choose, and to use their mind to take them out of the bondage that a lot of times we find ourselves in based upon other people's thoughts of who we should be.
Right, absolutely. And I just like to say I'm still going through, when I ended the book Breakthrough, I said, I am still breaking through and I hope you do too. And it was almost like a ... And I definitely want that to be said here because, I have not fully arrived. It is a constant battle daily.
Yes, it is.
To combat these voices that say you're less than, say you're not going to make it, say give up. You can't do it because they didn't do it. You can't be this because they weren't that. And it's a lot. It's a lot, especially in this time that we're in, the racial climate that we're in, the political climate that we're in, the limitations, just the constant heaviness on our mental health and emotional health, being isolated, being, separated from some of us, our loved ones, due to COVID, and just having to tap into parts of ourselves that we didn't even know were there or we're not even really familiar with. And I'm still learning.
Yes.
I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. I guess I would equate it to what Nina Simone calls freedom, just, it's nothing like it. I haven't gotten to that point where it's just complete freedom. You're uninhibited. You don't even think about what this means and what people are going to say, what they're going to think. And you are just walking in your greatness, without hesitation. And, that takes constant practice, and it's almost like a muscle that needs to be exercised. And there is a lot of, if I'm being completely honest, there's a lot of taking 3 steps forward and maybe 2 steps back, 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. And it is a back and forth sometimes, the give and take. It's moving forward. I think I said this in one of my mastermind classes for grief and loss. Sometimes it's moving forward. Sometimes it's standing still. Sometimes it's being the voice, and other times it's being silent. And that's where my challenge comes in, finding the balance of all those things.
Yes, I want you to know that I have not reached my breakthrough either. I know you think I have, because this is what happens. People look at you. People look at you and they think, "Oh my gosh, she got it all together."
I know we all look at each other that way, right? We don't see ourselves that way, but we look at someone else like, "Oh my God, she's got it."
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you that every day is still a challenge for me too. The noise that you were talking about, the voices inside your head that keeps telling that you can't do something, or that you're not good enough, or this is not perfect enough, or you have to start all over, or you'll never be able to do this. Those voices still plague me. And it's an everyday, like you mentioned, a mantra that I have to say to myself to remind myself that I am capable, that I am. And it's about silencing the other voice. I remember my mom told me that you can't serve 2 masters, right? So the 2 voices inside your head, if I look at them as there are 2 masters, who am I going to obey? So,
oh wow, I like that. I never looked at it that way.
You have to make a choice as to which one of these masters you're going to slay, because there's going to be conflict between the 2 voices, one telling you that you can, one telling you that you can't. Like I said, on the one hand, I hear the voice that says you can do all things. You were created to do good works and all of the things that I know that I'm capable of. And then on the other hand, you hear that other voice that say, what if you're not good enough? Who's going to like you?
Right.
There are people who are better than you. You're never going to be who you want to be. At some point, you have to silence a voice. And I think when we're walking and we're saying that we're moving by faith and we're saying that we're stepping out on courage, I honestly believe it's about slaying one of those voices. It's like picking up that slingshot and just, slinging it and hitting it straight in the eye and say, look, this is who I'm going to listen to, because I only have the one master. And that master is leading me to the right places in my life. I know the plans that I have for your life, and they're plans for you to do good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm writing it down, as you said, slaying, one of those voices. And I love the way that your mother explained it, because I've never heard it that way. And sometimes it's like us, breaking down these colloquialisms and these cliches and these scriptures that we know, right?
Yes.
Or just these things that we say that are so deeply rooted and ingrained in who we are. But we never, ever imagine the time where we're really going to have these words be tested in our own lives.
Exactly.
And I think that's the main challenge. For me, it's the voices, but also I'm learning, and it's hard and it's really tough to say, and it's something that I'm just really trying to wrestle with and figure out. But sometimes it's not the voices, it's people. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's the forces around you, from the outside that are trying to make their way in. And that's the difficult part, when you're trying to become yourself, and those that are around you, or those that are familiar with how you used to be, or those that are comfortable with how you used to be, or this is how we've always done it, really also being able to combat those things and those people, those limiting beliefs and just limitations that people tend to put on you simply because it would be more comfortable or familiar for them, for you to just be who you've always been.
Right.
And to stay the same, and for things to stay the same.
Right.
And so that's a big challenge for me, I think, in this space, when, some people are just kind of set in their ways. Some people are set where they are. And for me, I don't know. Just back to that longing, always longing for more, always yearning for more, always searching.
Right.
It's like a constant, it's a constant voyage to discover more. And, I pray I don't lose that, because I think that's what keeps me moving forward.
Yes.
But it can be difficult when you have these forces beside you, behind you, pulling you back.
Right. Let's talk about family members and friends and people around you that can't see your vision, and who want to place you in a box. One of the things that I had to learn, this was probably about a good 15 years now, I've been saying to myself, I will not allow someone else to define me. I must define myself, because when I define myself, I put myself out there and say, this is who I am. Accept me for who I am, or don't. I know that I'm a very passionate person. I'm also a very compassionate person, and I do carry my my heart on my sleeve. And where I might I might have a brass exterior, but my interior is quite fragile. And it's like, I do care what people think of me, but I have to put myself in a position where I won't allow somebody else's thoughts to recreate me. You understand what I'm saying? So by defining who I am and making sure I stick with it, and making sure that whoever approaches me know that they need to approach me at my terms, even though it might hurt. And there are times when I feel uncomfortable because I feel like I'm hurting someone's feelings, but at the same time, I have to make sure that I am staying true to myself and that I'm not allowing somebody else to try to shape me and make me into who they believe I should be. And sometimes it
Right.
means cutting off those people who are close to you. Sometimes it means,
Yeah, the hard part.
closing doors that were once open, cutting off your right arm if it offends you, plucking out your right eye if it offends
Right,
you
right.
know? And it's
Talk
hard to
about it,
do.
yeah.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do because we are compassionate people. We love all people, so we want to see other people live in their freedoms as well. But
Right.
it's important that we understand that that word free is for all of us. I don't want to carry other people's baggage, or I don't want to be placed in
That part.
bondage, right?
Hmm.
Because someone else can't understand my freedom. And
That part. That's the
yes,
part where that's where I land. With, I don't know that it's so much about what people think about me. I think it's more so about the baggage. I internalize other people's issues. I
yes,
internalize other people's, limitations, and and that's where I need to be set free. I need to be set free and set apart from, oh, that's your story. That's what happened to you.
yes,
That's what path you went down. That doesn't have to necessarily be mine. That doesn't necessarily have to be my end result. That doesn't have to be my story. And to your point, I wear my heart on my sleeve as well. I think I said earlier in the conversation that, why is it that I have to love so deeply? Why is it that I have to feel everything
mm-hmm.
so deeply? And, you know, that's where I am working. I'm working on that. I'm
Yes,
working on letting people go, letting some things go, um, giving it to God and completely surrendering it to Him. And most importantly, just getting quiet with myself,
yes,
and
yes,
like you say, casting out the noise around me, even if those people are close to me. Now, I'm great at creating boundaries. The problem is people are not great at abiding by them.
yes, yes, yes,
And that's where it gets really tricky for me. So I think my freedom is going to come when I really set myself apart. I think that's when my freedom is going to come.
yes,
When I really get to a place where I am, where I can break. There was a time I went on like a little short retreat, where I had to like just take some time away and just literally unplug. And God kept telling me, break the chains. And that's where I'm at right now, trying to break the chains.
okay. Well, you are a beautiful young woman, and like I said,
Thank
I'm
you.
glad I met you. I'm glad that you stayed in my life because
I know, yeah.
it's crazy how we met and how we just became so close to one another, and that says a lot about, I guess, what they say, spirit drawing the spirit. I don't know, but
I know.
yeah, but I'm glad
You've been
that
so encouraging and so nurturing and so loving and accepting.
oh,
That's been, an amazing reason, I think, for why we stay connected.
yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to continue to be that way. And it's so much easier when you have someone such as yourself who is accepting. There are times when I reach out to others and it's not so accepting. Everybody don't find me fascinating. Everybody,
oh,
so there are times when I am rejected. And that's okay too. My goal, my desire is to uplift, motivate, encourage, and I will continue to do that as much as I can.
right.
So I want to thank
You
you
definitely have it,
for
me, yeah.
having this candid conversation with me. It was
Yes, thank you for
great.
always having me and always asking for me back. Thank you.
Because you are such an interesting person. You always have such interesting things to say. Plus, you're just a good person that I like to talk to. And I know that I'm going to speak to you again. And, I know we talked about doing some projects together. So I know that we will be doing some things together as well in the future. And I'm looking forward to that. I know COVID has shut everything down, but.
Yes. And I've become very recluse. I tell you, I really have. And so I do remember getting your message, about what you were looking to do to put together. And I tell you, there are so many times you'd be surprised. I question, well, am I worthy to be doing that?
What?
And should I be on that platform?
What?
And should I, and even in the coaching space, I mean, I remember someone kind of spoke into my life, I forgot, a couple of years ago, just about me being a coach and whatnot. And I'm like, well, I remember I even wanted to study psychology, and I thought to myself, well, I got my own problem with what I look like, helping someone else up. And I'm like, I'm trying to help myself. And I'm still wrestling with that. Even as I wrote this book, coming into this space, this was just like, oh, I just happened to record my journey, but it's still heavy. And I'm like, oh my goodness, am I the qualified one to help you navigate you out of this space, Well, it's a lot.
Nobody feels like they're qualified. And what I like to say is that I'm like you in that sense. I don't want people to say I'm their teacher or I'm this. I always say, look at me as a guidepost. When you go places and there's a guidepost, it's just information. If there's anything that I can do to help you, then I will do that. So if you want to just look to me to just be a guidepost, that's fine. I don't have to be anything more than that. If I have information to share, I will share it, and I share freely. I share freely. So I say that to everybody. I'm here for everybody. I'm always here for everybody, and I'm always grateful for the people who come into my life, who have been an influence. And even though you think you're not, you have been an influence to me. Your smile, your joy. I like being in your presence. I really do. I like being in your presence. It brings a light into my life, and I need a light in my life from time to time.
Oh gosh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, that brings me joy to know that there's still, 'cause at times when you feel like your light is dim, and you feel like it's not shining brightly, it brings you joy to know that you impact somebody, even if it's one person. And that means a lot to me. That really means a lot to me, because it's difficult. We're in a really tough space these days, and there's so much, like you say, darkness in the world. There's so much evil in the world. There's so much going on that can trouble us. So just be a light.
Yes.
Just a little glimmer. That's everything.
Yes.
That's everything.
We're not denying that there's evil and darkness in the world, but we're just saying that, yes, there's evil, and yes, there's darkness in the world, but there's also light in the world. Be the light. Be light, because it only takes a little bit of light to dispel darkness. So if you concentrate on being the light in the world and not concentrate on the darkness, then you will see that you are making a difference in someone's life. Even if, Vernae, even if no one says it to you, you just have to know that you are.
I see that.
Yeah. All right. So will you come back and talk to me again at another time?
Of course. I don't know what we'll talk about next time, but it's always candid.
It's always candid. So whatever comes up, we're going to talk about. All of my conversations are going to be candid. So whatever.
I know. I'm already nervous.
Whatever comes up, because we're honest, right? And that's what it's about.
Right.
That's what it's about.
Right.
All right. So you've been listening to Real Talk with Real People, a candid conversation with Dr. Caroline Bethea-Jones. My guest today